Hang on, I thought this was an Amiga channel. So today in the lab we're working on these Apple II GS's. These are part of a larger project that I have, where I have some old data on Apple IIe floppy disks that was written by a family member back in the 80s, and I want to retrieve it. Now, if I was sane, I would just get one of those new kind of flux readers, make images of them, and deal with it all in emulators. But because I'm slightly crazy, we're going to do this the hard way. Now, I picked these Apple II GS's up a couple of years ago, back when they were still really cheap. Apple II GS's are still pretty cheap so far as the retro market's concerned. And they're really pretty interesting machines. They exist as kind of a bridge machine between the Apple II series and the Macintosh series. But not the early Macintoshes, more the mid-Macintoshes, like the Mac II line and beyond. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, the Apple II GS uses a lot of the same components as later Macintosh models. And that includes ADB keyboards, the same serial ports, the same monitor ports, the same floppy disk ports. So this keyboard here is Apple's first ADB keyboard. And this is Apple's first ADB mouse. And they are compatible with later Macintoshes. Here we see the Macintosh style serial ports, two of them, printer and modem. And most importantly, at least for my purposes, this means that the Apple II GS supports LocalTalk, which was Apple's kind of proprietary low-cost networking solution that really was pretty innovative for the time. We'll get into that later. Also on the back we have the aforementioned ADB port. This was the first use of ADB in Apple, and that later became the standard on all of the classic beige Macs. I think after the Apple or the Mac II line. Not entirely sure. We also have what is not a Macintosh compatible DisplayPort, right? The Apple II GS outputs 15 kilohertz video, much like the Amiga and a lot of other machines at the time. It uses the same connector that later Macs would use, but Macintosh has never outputted 15 kilohertz video, and the Macintosh monitors, to my knowledge, never supported it. So this is kind of a false positive here. But then the floppy drive port is similar to the ones used on later Macintoshes, but compatibility between the Macintosh and the II GS is actually really drive dependent rather than port dependent. So we'll get into that a bit later too. So with these I've got three different varieties of disk drives. The 2 5 1/4 inch are pretty standard. I believe that model was introduced during the Apple IIe era. And then I have two 3 1/4 inch drives here. This first one is a Unidisc. This was actually introduced with the IIc and follows its design language, and it was, to my knowledge, the first 3.5 inch drive that Apple produced that used double-sided discs. The ones that first came with the Macintosh were single-sided. I'm probably not going to use this drive because it's slower. However, it does need repair. There's a floppy disk stuck in it and it doesn't want to eject. We'll have to open it up at some point and figure out what's going on. But then this drive over here, this one is just Apple 3.5 inch disk drive. This is compatible with the II GS and also with some Macintoshes. So this was kind of a universal disk drive and was introduced with the II GS and matches it. It matches its design language. Ideally, I'll be able to get all four of these up and running, but we'll see. So both of these machines work and boot, But the monitor on the left one here, you can kind of see there's a problem with the CRT and the line spacing, the scan line spacing. So this part in the middle here is kind of, seems like it might be getting multiple scan lines in the same place, which is bad. That means that part of the CRT is liable to wear out sooner if it hasn't already. So that's something that definitely needs to be fixed. Might even be out of my skill level. But for right now, we're just turning this bad boy off and only use the better working monitor. Camera really doesn't pick up the image very well, but like here in person, it's clear, it's sharp, and it covers the whole screen. Now these Apple II GSs share a lot of similar case design elements to Macs of the same era, and they're designed to be mostly toolless, which was nice at the time and is still nice. However, the consequence of that is that the cases are entirely plastic except for some RF shielding, and thus I would say don't age as well as, by comparison, say the metal cases of the Commodore Amiga, right? Plastics have become brittle, and because that's all there is to the case, sometimes it causes problems. So to get one of these open, there are these two plastic pushes on either side of the case, and these push in and release a latch that's holding the top part of the case in place. And so to open the case, press both of these and pull up, and it lifts up just like the hood of a car. Now once we're in the case, we can see it's entirely plastic except for this RF shielding here, and this RF shielding is plastic welded in here. Now both of these are kind of grungy and I really want to wash them completely, so I'm probably going to remove these little plastic welds that keep in place this RF shield so that I can wash everything really thoroughly, and then we'll probably super glue that back on. We'll see. But you can see where, like, I'm talking about with the plastic design of this being both good and bad. It's nice because it's toolless, but already this unit has got some structural compromise here. There's pieces that are chipping off, and it's unavoidable because just these plastics are old and they're getting brittler and brittler all the time. So now that we got this open, we can see the board, power supply, and the RAM card over here. Pretty simple board, pretty small board. Simple is maybe not the right word. It's a very optimized board. Now this board does have a battery, and it's hiding under the power supply. So to get out the power supply, there's a little tab here that we have to pull back, and then we can just kind of lift up the power supply here. And I have to lift up and out because there's tabs on the back that keep it in. And then we also have to remove the cable, which I kind of do off camera here because it's tricky. So we got the power supply out, and again it was held in by this clip and then supported by these three protrusions here. And now that we have that out, we can see the battery right here. Let's zoom in on this guy. Now, this is a lithium type battery, so it's different from the NiCads that we have on, like, say, Amigas. And I found these to be a little bit more hardy. I'm not saying they never leak, but there are still a lot of them out there that are intact, and I would say more likely to be intact than a NiCad battery that you would find on an Amiga. This one, interestingly enough, still keeps time, and I'm not sure if this is the original battery or not. I can't see a date code on it. However, I'm going to remove it no matter what, just so that I know when the battery has been replaced and I'm not questioning whether I have a ticking time bomb in this machine. Now, this battery is soldered in. It's not in a caddy, so I'm going to have to cut it out and then either solder or connect a new one. I've heard that later models of 2GSs I actually have a battery caddy here, and I've looked for a battery caddy that I can put in here so that I don't have to be soldering and resoldering. But the dimensions for the two holes that the pins would go in for a caddy, I can't find anything that fits that's right for that. So I got one of these that I'm going to replace the hardwired battery with. And it's not something that'll sit on the motherboard, but at least it'll allow me to change out the battery or remove the battery if I put this in storage without having to break out the solder. And I'm likely going to put some headers on the board and make some little connectors, and then probably double-sided tape this to the inside of the case. But then this makes this into having the same kind of removable battery that later Macs would have, which is a 3.6 volt, I think, half AA size, which is exactly what this is, except for it is meant to be soldered onto a board. It's not just a regular battery. So to remove this, I'm just gonna snip this guy out of here. There we go. Lithium 3 volt, half AA. Now I can tell this one is an original because it says made in West Germany. So I know that this was before the fall of the Berlin Wall. Which is amazing because it still is holding a charge and was still keeping time. I was actually thinking this might be replacement, but nope, original. That's pretty amazing. Made in West Germany. Now we can just yank out the RAM card here. Oh, which this card right here provides up to 1 megabyte of RAM for this machine. This one's not fully populated, so I think it has 256 kilobytes. But this machine can actually get pretty high in RAM for a 16-bit micro. I think you can add in quite a bit. Now, to get the motherboard actually out so that I can, put in my new battery caddy, I actually have to flip the machine over. So on the bottom of the case there are these 3 retaining clips that hold in the nose of the case. So this part right here, and I need to remove this to get out the motherboard. So that was a bit tricky to get out, but with some ginger care, I was able to get all 3 pushed at once, and it kind of just lifts out of here. And now that that's out, we can see the board as a whole, and it really is a pretty simple looking design. Very clean, probably very optimized, I would say. And there's really only one connection here, and that's to the speaker. I guess we have the other power connection up at the top, but otherwise there are no other components. So it's, I would say, a very cost optimized design here. Now this motherboard is now held on by a variety of plastic clips, and once I get those off, I should be able to lift it up out of here. Now, all told, there's kind of 6 little plastic retaining clips spread throughout the board, and once you kind of wedge it up a little bit like this, you can start to get them loose, and then the board just pulls out. Now on the bottom we can see more of this RF shielding is plastic welded to the case itself, and I've got a bit of rust damage there, probably from a spill. Maybe some kid back in the 90s spilled their water there or something, but gonna have to clean that up. But that's it. That's disassembly, and so reassembling it should be a pretty reverse process. It's a nice design. It's a toolless case, and it's pretty easy to get open like that. But again, it hasn't aged very well. There's already kind of plastic pieces in here. I was good on this one not to break anything new. But there's kind of residual plastic bits left from other pieces of plastic that have died. So, you know, these are only going to get more and more delicate as they age. So probably better to do restoration like this now than kind of wait. So I got both of the batteries removed from both of these. Both were original, but thankfully neither had leaked. Now the nice thing about having two of these is I can split my restoration effort into two different streams. So the one here that's still kind of assembled doesn't appear to have any damage to its case whatsoever. So I'm going to use this one to try and figure out a way to get it actually booting into an operating system. The other one that had slightly damaged cases, I'm going to clean that, do a deep clean, and make sure that I really know what I'm doing before I start on the other one. So, you know, if I mess up there, it's not so much of an issue because that case is already at least slightly damaged. Also want to get the keyboard clean and maybe work on the floppy drives, but I have kind of two sets of things so that I can do those things in parallel. So, next episode, we'll try and figure out how to get an operating system on this dang thing and get it loaded up into GSOS so I can actually start doing things with it. Thank you all for watching. Be back next time.